Have D&D scheduling conflicts made you think, what the heck, how am I even supposed to run a game when people can show up one week but not the next, and there's always a player missing, and sometimes players can make it and sometimes they can't, and sometimes there's players gone for 2-3 weeks in a row. I feel like I never have a full party. It's so hard to get nailed down the best time to play. If you feel like you struggle with these types of questions, you are not alone. I have found ways to deal with all of them though, and I'm going to share my methods with you. This is the stuff that I do today, right now, to fix scheduling conflicts in my D&D game. And you know what? Mwah, they work like a charm. You're not going to want to miss this. Let's dive into it. Solving scheduling issues with D&D can be the true BBEG. This is the big challenge. This is one of the biggest challenges in our modern world. And I'm going to just give you some straight answers for how I've managed this over the years. Over the years, I've tried many different ways of doing this, and I'm just going to tell you straight up how I have come to solve these issues. So first of all, there's the big issue. If it seems impossible to get people together in like a physical setting, you might want to consider switching to virtual. I have a GM Philosophy Discord, links in the description. If you want to find other gamers to run games with, you can jump in there. We have a looking for games section. With that being said, you can also invite your friends to virtual. Sometimes it's easier for people to get on virtual and play than it is for people to show up in person. But that's the first thing I would consider recommending is if you have a hard time getting your group together in physical, like all together, you might want to consider moving to virtual. Secondly, we have this issue of time and day. If you're going to play like once a week, which day should you play and what time should it be at? Here's my rule of thumb for this. I think about times that would work really well for me. But then I talk to like probably the one or two other core gamers in my group. Generally, in every gaming group, there are going to be one or maybe two gamers who are going to be really core and essential. You know they're going to show up on time. You know they're going to be there. You know they're going to put in their all. You know they're very committed. So I like to get together with one or two other core gamers and find out what time works for them. I will then find a time that works for me and for that person or those two people, and then I will solidify that as the time. And then I present that as the time. If the other gamers can't make it, I'll ask them, well, what would need to change? And if it's relatively close to that, and if it'll work for like me and the other core gamers in my group, then I would basically say, okay, maybe we can shift a little bit. But to be really honest, what's going to work best for me and for those other core gamers, like we decided on a time, we decided on a day. If the other gamers can't make that, I'm not going to stress about it that much. I would rather find different people to game with who can accommodate that schedule than trying to come up with like either like a scheduling different days and different times every week or doing stuff like that, jumping through hoops, in other words. I realize that that may be a harsh thing to say, but over the years, I have really learned that you cannot defeat the calendar and time in one-on-one combat. People have jobs, they have busy lives. And sometimes it's just more stress and pressure to try to force the peg into the hole than to just let go of your expected outcome and to say, you know what, me and players 1 and 2 can make this time work, but players 3, 4, and 5, they're not going to be able to make it. You know what? That's okay. Let's open up the table to maybe some new players who could meet at this time, take a couple weeks, source those players. That's going to be way easier online. For example, I'm starting my new Dunes of Fate campaign once a month, running on Friday evenings, and I posted in my Discord in the looking for game section about my game, and within 24 hours, not even 24 hours, we had literally a whole roster of 6 players, and then one dropped out, so we have like 5 players. Boom, roster filled. Everyone knows what time, everyone knows what day. This was really easy. If I tried to like fit the same 2 or 3 or 4 players that I usually play with into that game, there's probably no way they could make it work. They're maybe playing other games. They're maybe working on those nights. I have people I game with on Tuesday nights that could never make that Friday night game. And the reason for it is just because of different scheduling. So rather than trying to conform the group and force them into a schedule, rather let's conform the group to our schedule. Let's choose the group based on availability as a common denominator criteria. And if you kind of go in this direction and you let go of kind of the other way, this resolves a lot of stress. And then we come to the next big question, which is what do you do when players cancel? Now, this is actually not as big a deal as people think it is. And I deal with this in a very simple way. Whenever I create the world, the situation, the story, the world state setting, right, I always try to include a plan for how we're going to handle players not being there. One example is I used to run these games. I'll link to the story in the description, but I used to run these games in a homebrew world. And basically, there was this magical phenomenon where sometimes players would zap out of just literally out of reality because the magic gizmos that were going on projecting them into the world would like give out, like they would like short circuit. And this was just, not only did it fit with the story, but it was a way for me to kind of explain character absences. So if a player could make it, or they had to leave early, or they came in late, whenever they weren't there, their character would just blink out of existence and they just wouldn't be there. And then they would reappear in the highest, like, closest concentration of friendlies. So in other words, if there were like three of their friends over here and two of them over here, zoop, they would zap into where the three of them were. And then, that was always the program. In my Barrenlands campaign, we have it worked out to where, since they're in like an unknown frozen Arctic wasteland, the player characters are going to be like, since they don't know anything about the area, they're going to be going on scouting, scavenging, sourcing, hunting kind of missions, trips when they're absent. So if they're not there, we just talk about it and explain what their character's doing. And then they go, and when they get back, we're going to roll some checks. What did they get while hunting? What did they find while they were out scavenging? Did they encounter anything weird? We just role play it via text in the Discord. Boom, this works very well. Now, in my Friday night campaign where I'm running the haunting at Ashburrow, which is actually a really super awesome adventure module I wrote. If you'd like to check it out, link is in the description. But me and a group are running through that, and because it's like a mystery game, and due to the like nature of that specific adventure, we have it set up to where if one player can't make it, we just don't play. And the truth is, sometimes we go literally weeks without ever even playing in that campaign because one or more of us is busy, and that's okay. You get to choose how you want to deal with that. Now, with that being said, I'm also starting up this new Friday campaign, the Dunes of Fate, which is kind of like a desert survival adventure campaign. And I'll be honest, the players don't know this yet, so don't like tell them. But the mechanism for that is going to be this phenomenon, this magical phenomenon, and they are going to magically blink out if they cannot make it because of the way the world state is and because of the magical phenomenon going on. So you always want to build a mechanism into your world that will explain what will happen if the players don't show up or have to leave early or something like that. By the way, if you need to build like a cool new world state and you're building a new world, starting a new game, you need to kind of figure out what your world's going to be like. There's only one tool I trust for that. It's called the Structural World Building Randomizer. This is an ebook I created. You can buy it for just $3. Links in the description, or you can join my Ko-Fi to get it for free. But it contains 7D100 tables specifically formulated to assist you with world building for TTRPGs. You can random roll geography and layout, political structure and governance table, and just all kinds of other elements. Just like literally, D100 tables let you come up with awesome world state options. But I find that building your mechanism into the world from the beginning works a lot better than just planning to roll with it as you go. Player absences can be one of those things that can really hurt immersion and make it difficult to explain in game if you do not have a good mechanism for dealing with it, which is why I always like to include a mechanism for dealing with it in my world state settings. Another tip that I think is really important is to communicate with your players. Make sure that they know ahead of time when the game is going to be, what day it's going to be, how often you're going to play, and how long you plan to play. Try to stick to those times. Try to stay consistent. When you have a consistent gaming schedule, it allows your players to actually mark that time off on their calendar instead of it being up in the air and them not quite knowing, because then they won't want to miss out on like other fun things that might be going on. But if they know you're going to be running your game, they can prioritize it, right? So being really consistent with your game can be super helpful to keeping it regular and cutting back on things like players missing sessions and stuff. Let's talk about scheduling tools. Now, I don't personally like to use specific scheduling tools for talking about D&D and stuff. I guess it's like I'm really familiar with scheduling tools because I've worked in digital marketing forever, and managing meetings with remote teams can be kind of like scheduling a D&D session. With that being said, I like to stick to just messaging apps where we are all present. So like Discord is my favorite. I have also used Facebook Messenger for this. I've also used just like texting my friends. I will admit I'm not as big a fan of that because I kind of prefer to have it on my computer because I can type so much faster than I can text. Some of my friends use WhatsApp for this. Like they say it's really, really good. But I think that really anywhere where you can all be on the same messaging app. So you can like message out bulletins like, yes, we are playing this week. Or yeah, we're going to get together this time. And just like being able to organize plans and have everyone see those plans and making sure that all the players are regularly like tuning into that. Finding a common theme of that is really the most important thing. One of the most frustrating and I think problematic things that can happen is if you have like maybe 3 of your players are on Discord, but then like 2 of them never check Discord. So you find yourself having to text them, and then maybe one of them rarely responds to text. So you have to like text again and double check, or maybe you have one on text, but then one is on Facebook Messenger. It just can get really confusing if you're not all in the same place. So I would just recommend talking to everyone and all of you making the commitment to like get on the same messaging app. And as a GM, you might be tempted to say, hey, everyone get on Discord. You can do that, but I will also say, be open to getting on something new. Like, for example, one of my gaming groups, my in-person core group, they actually all use WhatsApp and they really, really, really find it useful. And I'm not on that. And I will admit, communication has been very like laborsome in me trying to communicate with them. So I think I'm going to actually get on WhatsApp because that would just streamline it. And that will require me needing to like learn a new thing, but that's okay. I can learn a new thing, and finding that tool that works for everyone is really, really important. So that's just like an example of something that works best, I think, for scheduling and just talking to the players. And that's another thing. Keep communication open, really communicate every single week. As the game approaches, message everyone a few days in advance. Hey, just to let you know, we are playing this weekend, right? Communicate, over communicate. We are playing. And then maybe a couple days later, hey, 48 hours till game time. I'm super pumped. Just letting you all know we are still good to go. And then, of course, if you have to cancel very, very early, like as early as possible. Let players know as soon as possible because they might want to make different plans. And if you just wait till the last minute to cancel, that's kind of that's something that'll take away from their ability to like find alternate plans. But anyway, so make sure that you communicate using those shared apps, spaces where you're all there and can see the messages. This works the best. I also think we should normalize playing with a smaller group. Let's say that you normally run with 5 players. This is a great group size, but let's say that 3 of them have to cancel. Well, I have run with many different policies. I've used the policy where if it's like, if at least half of us are there, we're still going. Or I've run with the policy of like, if one person can't make it, we'll still run. If 2 have to cancel, then we're going to cancel the session. But you know what? These days, I find a lot of value in even running with smaller groups. For example, let's just say that everyone had to cancel, but just 2 of the players. So you like 3 cancel, but you still have 2. If you have a good mechanism in your world that can explain this, then running a session with just those 2 players, that might seem weird. It might seem like the energy is kind of down or low. When you have more players, there's a lot more natural energy. But what a lot of game masters don't realize is that when you run a smaller group like that, you get the opportunity for such in-depth role play. You can go in and really get things done with those players. So I actually am a proponent these days of like playing with those 2 players who show up. Like even if you have a much smaller group, go ahead and run it. Just be chill, just run the session. You guys can do things that maybe you wouldn't normally have done with the whole group there, and you can get a lot of character development in. That session might prove to be one of the funnest sessions you've run. Now, you may have to deviate from your plans. You may need to come up with some interesting plot hooks to kind of like bridge the in between. And there's really only one tool I trust for amazing plot hooks. It's a free ebook I wrote called The Ultimate Plot Randomizer. This contains 4 D100 tables that let you random roll plot hooks on the fly, roll in the hook table, the complication table, and the climax table, and on the wild and wacky table to put together amazing plot arcs for your players. Link is in the description. If you sign up for my email list, the first email you get will have the download link to this in it. Download it, print it out, put it with your stuff, boom. Great way to run new plot arcs for players, especially in the situations where you kind of deviate from the normal plan or what you were planning to do. And that's what I do. And I kind of think running a game like anyway, even with just 2 players, is actually pretty cool. I will admit that one-on-one role play, like playing with only 1 player, this is kind of a very niche thing. I have done it. I have found value in it. I wouldn't normally do it these days unless we were specifically going to do that. Nowadays, I would want at least 2 players. Otherwise, I would just kind of say, hey, let's just go ahead and cancel the session, wait till we can get more players to be able to be here. But that's just my outlook on it. You might like playing with one other player, and you might find value in that. And if you do, I would recommend that you go ahead and do it. Don't cancel it just because other GMs would maybe cancel it. But personally, I would still cancel if it was only one other player. But that's just me personally. One other thing I want to say is that I want to give a big shout out and thank you to our Ko-Fi supporters, especially our first gold supporter, Craig. Craig and the rest of the Ko-Fi supporters, thank you so much for supporting the content, the Discord, the mailing list, and everything else that goes on here at GM Philosophy. The GM Philosophy Ko-Fi gives you access to my entire ebook library. There are 4 different tiers. Each of them have additional features, give you access to different stuff. If you're interested in gaining access to those resources and future ebooks, we drop 2 new ebooks per month in the shop, which members gain access to in the ebook library. So it's pretty awesome. You're going to get a lot of value out of it. Plus for silver tier, I drop an editorial, kind of like a special edition insider magazine about the channel, myself, stuff going on within the GM Philosophy world. And then with gold tier, you get shout outs and also video requests every month. And with the partner tier, you get even bigger things, like once a month, a coffee/lunch with me over Discord chat, and a bunch of other cool stuff. This is how I fund the channel. This is how we keep the Discord, the YouTube, and the mailing list afloat. So if you're interested in supporting small creators who love creating content about D&D and sharing it with the world, and you enjoy the YouTube and get value out of it, hey, click down below, maybe consider subscribing. And that, my friends, is going to be a wrap. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Geophilosophy in the Morning. I'm here every single day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, and I will see you awesome people on the next one.